Welcome to our basic audio editing for podcast video workshop. We will be taking a look at the fundamentals of using an audio editing software like Adobe Audition to recreate the first 30 seconds of a podcast together. In this video, you will learn how to create a new audio project, import media into your project, understand the fundamentals of multi-track audio editing, learn how to remove noise from your imported media, fade volume through 2 different methods, and lastly, export your media. If you haven't already, please pause this video and download the project files from brown.edu/go/MML podcasting workshop. Make sure to download the entire contents of the Google folder. Let's start by first listening to the podcast we're about to recreate together. Hi there, and welcome to the Multimedia Lab's Audio Editing Workshop podcast.
Mariamabella is sitting on her couch in Lansing, Michigan, swiping through Tinder. Through photo after photo of white boys holding fish. Then she finds a meme.
So all it said was, Amin, 28, and then had his pictures, and then it said less than a mile away from you.
Mariam doesn't usually swipe for people without bios, but this time she did. So they matched and started talking.
Now let's take a look at what we just heard inside the Adobe Audition editor. As you listen, look at the screen. What connections can you make between what you are hearing and what you're seeing in Audition? Hi there, and welcome to the Multimedia Lab's Audio Editing Workshop podcast.
Mariamabella is sitting on her couch in Lansing, Michigan, swiping through Tinder. Through photo after photo of white boys holding fish. Then she finds a meme.
So all it said was, Amin, 28, and then had his pictures, and then it said less than a mile away from you.
Mariam doesn't usually swipe for people without bios, but this time she did. So they matched and started talking.
Let's begin with the main central window, which is called our multi-track editor. You may have noticed that there are several multicolored tracks and that they are labeled. There is no limit to the amount of tracks you can have, and it's useful to label them based on what audio clips you think they will hold. Ours are labeled narration, interview, music, and intro to podcast, respectively. You will also notice that the tracks are filled with corresponding colored chunks of audio we call clips. In each chunk, you can see what we call the waveform, which visually represents the sound in each clip. The spikes you see are called peaks, like a mountain peak. In general, the higher the peak, the louder and more audio information there is. Conversely, the valleys of the waveform represent low volume or silence with little audio information. When you start working more with audio, these waveforms will give you useful insights into where you should be making cuts and how loud your clip will be compared to others. Hovering above all the tracks is our timeline, which acts as a global reference for time in our project. You can zoom in and out of this timeline, which we will demonstrate a bit later. You may also notice that there is a blue triangular shape attached to the timeline with the red line that cuts through each track below. This is called the scrubber. When you play your project, the scrubber will move in real time, but it's also how we can move to specific times in our project to edit and manipulate audio clips. Below the tracks is our levels panel, which relates to us how loud our overall project is as we play through. It has 3 color ranges, green, yellow, and red, with red being the loudest. You may also notice that each individual track has a level 2, which is specific to the audio contained within it. In general, ambient sound, like background music or effects, should stay in the green range, while the human voice should be in the yellow range. If you see your audio going into the red, it's probably too loud and will begin to degrade the sound quality of your project. The bin area is where you will import the audio files you want to use for your project. It's important to note that Adobe Audition, as with most audio editors, is a non-destructive editor. What this means is that while editing, the changes that you make to your media, such as trimming it, changing its volume, or adding an effect, will not permanently affect your original media. Instead, what Adobe does is creates a working copy of the media that you import to be used for the project, meaning that you can do anything you want to your audio clips, but if you mess up or need to start over, your original media is safe. So don't be afraid to try things. Above the timeline and files is our toolbar. We will be using a few of these tools, like the selection tool and razor tool, later on. Now that we've gone over the layout, let's begin recreating our podcast. Go ahead and open Adobe Audition. To create a new project, navigate up to File, then New, then Multi-Track Session. Here, you can name your project and choose the destination it is saved to. In general, it's recommended that you create a project folder that contains your project and all of your media so that it's all in one place. For the human voice, a sample rate of 44/100 is best, and you can leave the rest of the choices to their default settings. Navigate to the Projects Files folder you downloaded earlier. In the Clips folder, select the files titled Narration, MML Intro with Background Noise, and Interview with Miriam, and drag them into the Files bin in the upper left of your project workspace. Do the same for the file Bend Sound A New Beginning, which is in the Background Music folder. Now that you have imported your media into your project, let's prepare our tracks by renaming them to help us organize our podcast. Though the order is arbitrary, let's start with the first track on top. Begin by clicking once where it says Track 1. You can now rename the track by typing in Interview. Let's do the same for track 2, 3, and 4, renaming them Narration, Intro, and Background Music, respectively. Next, let's bring over our audio files from our Files bin into the tracks to create clips. Drag and drop the Bend Sound A New Beginning file into the background music track. Next, we will move the Interview with Miriam file into the interview track. Then, the MML Intro with Background Noise file into the intro track. And lastly, the narration file into the narration track. One thing you may have noticed is that the file names we are using are already very helpful, but most audio files that come from your phone or other audio recorder will come with nonsensical names made up mostly of numbers. It may be helpful before you begin editing to rename your raw media files into something contextual, like we have done here. It's also worth noting that it's very hard to see some clips, like the ones in our interview and intro tracks, whereas it's easier to see the clips in our background music and narration tracks. This is because our timeline is really zoomed out, and most of our clips are very short, meaning they appear smaller on the screen. We can remedy this by zooming in using the corresponding zoom button on the bottom right of the main multi-track editor window. As you work, you will have to zoom in and out constantly depending on what you're doing. Think of it like you're an artist walking around your sculpture to get a better view of what's left to be done. Let's listen to what we have by pressing the spacebar or the play button. You can press the spacebar again to pause your playback.
So all it said,
Hi there, and welcome to the Multimedia Lab. It can be hard to hear your clips at first because they're all on top of each other and playing at the same time. However, we can isolate or solo a track by clicking on the S icon on an individual track. Soloing a track means that you will only hear what is on that track.
Miriam Abella is sitting on her couch in Lansing, Michigan.
Audio Editing Workshop Podcast.
Through photo after photo.
You can also mute a track by pressing the M icon on any individual track. You can also mute any number of tracks you want at any time.
So all it said
Hi
Mary
there,
Mabella
and
is
welcome
sitting
to
on
the
her couch in
Multimedia
Lansing,
Labs
Michigan,
audio.
and then
swiping
had his
through Tinder.
pictures, and then it said less than a mile away from you.
This will come in handy when you start layering audio tracks on top of each other. Remember, if you're playing back your project and you can't hear an audio clip that you know you put into the multitrack editor, then it's possible that the track has been muted. Let's start by concentrating on your background track. First, we'll be deciding how long we want the music to play at full volume before we fade it down so that we can hear our intro. Usually 3 to 5 seconds is sufficient, but feel free to play it by ear. Begin by soloing the background track or muting all other tracks as I have done. With the scrubber all the way to the left at the beginning of our timeline, press the spacebar to begin playback. Press it again when you feel it's a good time to transition into your intro clip. Now let's take a look at your background track audio clip. You will see a yellow horizontal line that runs slightly above the middle of your clip. This line represents the track volume. It's horizontal because right now the track volume is consistent over time. We can change the volume over time graphically by drawing a different line. Start by making sure your selection tool, which looks like the mouse icon, is selected in the toolbar. Next, click on the background track audio clip. Then hover your mouse over the point where the timeline scrubber's red line and the yellow line meet. Click the mouse again and you will see a gray square appear. This is called a keyframe. Keyframes are ways of programming some instructions to happen at specific times in our timeline. Here we are saying at this point in time, I want the volume of the track to be at this level. Now let's fade down or change the volume of the track gradually. Start by moving the scrubber forward about 2 seconds in the timeline by either pressing the spacebar in the timeline or dragging the scrubber to the right. Make another keyframe. Now click and hold the second keyframe and drag it down a bit so that the yellow line looks like a slide. You will notice that a number box pops up. You have now created an instruction that says, at this point in time, I want the volume to be at this lower level. The software then gradually decreases the volume between these points in time. Keyframes can also be moved independently, left and right, to have the change happen quicker or take longer, but be careful as this can get away from you. Using the scrubber redline method is the most precise way to create keyframes. Next, let's drag the MML intro with background noise file into our intro track. Then move it over so that the beginning of the intro clip lines up with the second keyframe we created in the background clip. By doing this, when we play back, the background music should be lowered by the time we hear the intro clip. Before we do, though, move the scrubber to the end of the intro clip and let's make another keyframe on our background clip. By placing this keyframe, we are essentially instructing our project that between this keyframe and the last, I want the track volume to be low and consistent. Next, move the scrubber forward about 2 seconds and make another keyframe on the background clip. Drag that keyframe up to about the height of where our first keyframe is. In this way, we've created a fade down, followed by several seconds of consistent low volume, and then a fade up. Feel free to pause this video and play back your project to hear the difference by moving the scrubber to the beginning of your timeline and pressing spacebar. The next step chronologically in our podcast will be the narration. But first, we should allow the background music to play at full volume for 2 seconds before we fade it back down and introduce our narration clip. Using the keyframe method we just learned, do this now. Feel free to unmute the intro track as it's now in place, and the narration track since we are about to work with it. Use the selection tool to drag the narration audio file into the narration track so it begins right where you just finished fading the background clip. If your scrubber is still there, then use that as a guide. Next, we would play our narration clip and decide when would be a good time to introduce another element, like our interview clip. In this case, we're going to play through and stop our scrubber right after the narrator says, "And that's when she found Amin."
Fish. Then she finds Amin.
In order to insert our interview clip, we will have to split our narration track into two. First, select the razor tool from the toolbar. Then hover it over your clip where the red scrubber line should be set to the right after the word Amin, and click. You'll notice your clip no longer is highlighted. This is because you now have two separate clips. Use the selection tool to now select and drag the second clip over to the right and create some space. Next, select your interview file from the bin and move it onto the interview track so that it sits between your recently split narration clips. The interview clip should start where the first narration clip ends, and the second narration clip should start where the interview clip ends. This concludes the composing section of this tutorial. You can imagine how you might continue this process of adding, splitting, and inserting content into a longer audio editing or podcasting project. If you solo your intro track and play it, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of noise in the background that sounds like the hum of an HVAC system. Hi there, and welcome to the Multimedia Lab's. Let's clean that up. Using the selection tool, double-click on the intro audio clip. You'll notice your working space has changed from our multi-track editor into our waveform editor. This space allows us to take a closer look at a single audio file or clip, which makes it great for cleaning up things like background noise. The first thing we need to do is isolate a sample of our background noise that we want to eliminate. This can usually be found at the beginning or end of your track, or sometimes in between pauses in which no one is speaking. We only need a couple of seconds. Lastly, background noise usually looks like a straight line with very tiny spikes, as we can see in the beginning of our clip. Start by selecting a couple of seconds of the background noise by clicking and dragging on the waveform. Play it back by pressing spacebar to make sure there's no actual content in our selection. Next, navigate up to the Effects menu and select Noise Reduction/Restoration, and then Capture Noise Print. Click OK on the pop-up dialog box. Next, select the entire clip by double-clicking on the waveform. Navigate back to the Effects menu, then to Noise Reduction/Restoration, and this time select Noise Reduction Process. Let's take a look at the Noise Reduction pop-up screen. This may look somewhat complicated, and as a tool it can be, but even learning just the basics as we are now will vastly improve your audio quality. First, you'll notice that there's a graph made up of green, red, and yellow dots. There is also a blue line with two keyframes on either end. What we want to do is adjust the shape of the blue line so that the green and yellow dots overlap each other as much as possible. Start by moving the keyframes at either end and line up the dots. You may need to create more keyframes by clicking anywhere along the blue line for finer control. This is tricky and can take some time, but the results will be worth it. Once you have your blue line correct, you can fine-tune the entire line by using the noise reduction slider, which will move the green dots up or down. Again, your goal is for them to overlap as much as possible. In this example, we are reducing noise by 50%. Be careful not to be overly aggressive with this number, as the higher the percentage, the larger chance that you will not only remove the background noise, but also portions of the human voice in the rest of your clip, leaving your clip sounding overly distorted. Once finished, click Apply. You should see that the beginning of your clip where you first selected your noise is now just a straight line, and if you play it back, you should hear almost nothing. These changes are automatically updated in the multitrack editor. Earlier we learned how you can use keyframes to adjust the volume of large clips to help you compose and structure your podcast. Now we will learn how to fade the volume of shorter clips, fading in at the beginning and fading out at the end, so that they blend in smoothly with your other tracks. Navigate to the multitrack editor and go to the first clip in your narration track. In the upper corner of the clips, you will see 2 light gray squares, each with a dark gray triangle inside them. Using the selection tool, drag the left square over to the right. You will see that a vertical yellow line appears that bends to the right the more you drag the square. This yellow line represents the fade-in of your clip. You want to drag the square over until the curve of the vertical yellow line just about touches the first peak in your waveform. Repeat the same action with the gray square on the top right of your clip, dragging it to the left to fade out your clip. You may need to zoom in to fine-tune your fades using the zoom tool in the bottom right corner. In general, it's a good practice to do this for all of your clips. Now we'll finish our mini podcast by working again on the background track. First, make sure your scrubber is about a second ahead from the end of your last audio clip, in this case, the second narration clip. Traditionally, when a podcast or audio story finishes, the background music, which has been low throughout the podcast, comes back up to a regular volume for a few seconds before fading out entirely, effectively providing an end to your story. Using keyframes as we did before, set a keyframe where your scrubber is, and then another one a second or two further on in the timeline. Drag the second keyframe up above the middle line of the clip where it was before we started editing. Move your scrubber 3 to 4 seconds forward and add a third keyframe. Then move your scrubber forward again 4 to 5 seconds, create a keyframe, and drag it all the way down to create a ramp of sorts. Using the razor tool, split your background track at the 4th keyframe. Then select the second clip and delete it by pressing the delete key on your keyboard. Lastly, we need to export your project into a file format you can share widely, such as an MP4, WAV, or AIFF file. Navigate to the File menu, and then scroll down to Export, then Multi-Track Mixdown, then select Entire Session. Using the dialog box, name your file and select the location you want to export to. For now, the desktop may be the easiest, though we highly recommend exporting to whatever project folder you've created for this podcast. We are exporting in WAV format because it won't compress your audio file at all, giving you the best possible quality, but it does yield bigger size files. If you plan on publishing your file for streaming or other online modes of distribution, then MP4 may be a better choice, as it's more universal and has a smaller file size despite a small loss of audio quality. When you're done, click OK and your file will export to the desktop. Play it to hear your mini podcast that you just created. This concludes the MML Basic Audio Editing for Podcasts workshop. We hope you're able to use what you've learned to make and share your own audio stories.
Welcome to the Multimedia Labs. My name is Kelly Egan. I'm the lead instructional media coordinator here. The Multimedia Labs are a resource for all the students at Brown. They are designed as a place to both learn and create with technology. So we cover a wide variety of services, including video and audio, printing, animation, virtual reality, and we try to empower students to use those tools. I like to think of the Multimedia Labs as a space for creative technology. So not only do we have creative tools that you can use, but we try to think of ways to use technology creatively. And one of the ways that we do that is that we have both a staff and a community who are interested in helping people discover that. Hope to see you soon at the Multimedia Labs.